Hello everyone. Welcome to the fourth video of Figma plugin development course. Here we are with our very first full-on hands-on development video. And I'm sure you were able to follow me throughout all the theoretical topics that we have covered so far in the previous video. But in case if you have any unresolved queries or doubts, feel free to put that up in the comment section and I'll try my best to help you out. Now, before we begin, congratulations on making it this far. Now you know how Figma plugins works, what are the things that can be done and what are the things that cannot be done. So now is the perfect time for you to create your first Figma plugin, right? So this video is going to be slightly longer compared to our previous videos as this video contains a whole hands-on journey. But bear with me. By the end of this video, you will have your first default template Figma plugin ready. So let's get started. Alright, so before we get started with writing our very first Figma plugin, I would like you to introduce to this website called figma.com/developers. So this is a one-stop developer guide for anyone who's writing a Figma plugin. You can come to this website and check out different sections like REST APIs, plugins, embeds, and integration. But for now, we're going to cover this section called Create Plugins. So when I click on Create Plugins, I'm taken to this page which is called Introduction. But as you can see, there are multiple other pages as well, like API references and updates. For this video, we are going to only focus on introduction. As you can see on this introduction page, there is a side panel which has multiple other sub pages like introduction, prerequisites, setup guide, what's supported, and a lot more pages. For this video, we are going to cover the content of this page called setup guide. Now you might be wondering, why are we skipping introduction, prerequisites, and what's supported? Well, that is because the content of those pages are already covered by me in the previous videos. So all my previous videos were derived from the content which is already existing on these pages. But if you want, you can check out these pages after the end of this video. So let's get started with the setup guide. So as you can see, this is a very short setup guide, and by the end of the setup guide, you will create a plugin which will have a modal and an input field where you can input a number and create rectangles by the number of input that you give. So let's get started with creating the basic Figma plugin. So as you can see here, the very first step is to install Visual Studio Code. You can click on this website and it will take you to the Visual Studio Code download page. Now before you download this, let me explain you what exactly is Visual Studio Code. So Visual Studio Code is a coding environment for you where you can write your HTML, CSS and JavaScript code and manage your project files all in one place. Now this is an industry standard tool which is used by many developers and they like it a lot. Now you have a free choice to use any other development tool. Now let's see what's the next step. Next step is to install Node.js and NPM. Now before we get started with installing this, let me explain you what exactly is Node.js and why you would be needing that. So Node.js and NPM is something that will be required in further steps where you will be installing some packages which are mentioned over here. So I will be helping you with installing these packages one by one when we reach those steps. But for now, you need to remember that you will be needing this Node package manager to install those packages. So you can simply head over to this Node.js download page, select your operating system and download the install package. Once you download it, the installation guide is very simple and you will be able to install the Node.js. Now, after you have installed the Node.js, the next step is to install TypeScript. This TypeScript, as you can see, is going to be installed with npm command, which is again dependent on the Node package manager. So for now, I'm going to skip this step and I'm going to cover this step once we open our Visual Studio Code. So don't worry, we are going to definitely cover the step, but not now. Now the next step is to get the Figma desktop app. As you can read over here, you cannot write Figma plugins directly to your Chrome browser by working with Figma over Chrome. You need to have a Figma desktop app to test your plugins. So that is why you need to download the desktop app. Now once you download the desktop app, you can open up the desktop app and we can start with the first steps of creating our new plugin. So now let's go ahead and do that. Open our Figma desktop app. Now as you can see, I have already created a file which is called test environment and I'm going to use this blank file to test the plugin that we'll be creating now. You can also create a new file for you and give it any name that you want. Now if you want to create a new plugin, what you have to do is you have to click on your profile over here and head over to this plugin section. Once you click on that, you will see all the list of installed plugins that you have. Now below that is a section called in development. Over here, you will see the list of all the plugins that you have developed on your own system. And also, as you can see, there's an option called create a new plugin. Now once you click on that, a plugin creation module will open. Here you can write the name of your plugin. So let's say we write test plugin FPD and we can click on continue. But before I click on continue, let me explain what exactly is the below part. Whenever you're creating a Figma plugin, you can either create a new plugin from scratch, or either you can browse an existing plugin which you have downloaded from any open source website. So this is really helpful when you are trying to understand the open source plugins which are already available, or if you're working with multiple developers who are sharing the project files with you. But for now, we are only going to create the new plugin and we'll cover this step later onwards. So let's click on continue, and over here you will see that we have an option to choose a template. Now I can choose from empty, run once, and with UI and browser APIs. So let me explain each of these templates one by one. So empty template is something that will create a project for you without any files. That means this will be really helpful for someone who is an already advanced plugin developer and they want to configure the file by themselves. Run once is a kind of template where you will be creating a plugin without a UI. That means that you are expecting the user of this plugin to run this plugin once and get the job done. For example, if you would have seen in the previous video, we had remove.bg as a plugin, which you can directly run without any interface and it gets the job done. The next template is with UI and the browser APIs. Now this is the template that we are going to follow for this video. And this is a plugin template that you will always see very frequently in all the Figma plugins. This is a template where you will have a plugin UI where user can come and interact with the plugin, put in their inputs, and then generate the results out of that input. So let's go ahead and click this template and save. Now once I click on save as, it asks me the location directory where I want to save this project folder. So let's say I select this folder and I click on save. It saves my project and it says that test plugin FPD successfully created. Now you can also see that Figma is asking me to build and run my plugin and install Node.js and TypeScript. But as you remember, we have already installed the Node.js in the previous step, and TypeScript is something that we're going to do now. Also, you can see that it's asking that for us to open the readme.md file and check that out for more information. Now we're going to do this by opening all the project files in our Visual Studio Code. So let's go ahead and do that. So now that we are inside Visual Studio Code, let's open our project directory. So as you can see, you can click on open folder and it will open you a finder browse window. Otherwise, you can also go to file option here and click on open. This will do the same. So what you can do is you can browse the file directory where you have created your project. You can select the project and click on open. This will open all your project files inside Visual Studio Code. So as you can see, I have a left side panel over here where I can see all my files inside this folder which we just created, which is test plugin FPD. Now before I go ahead and explain all these files, I would like to jump straight into readme.md file. So as you remember, while creating the Figma plugin, Figma interface suggested us to open this file and take it from there to understand the few steps which are involved in creating your first Figma plugin. So as you know, all these steps are something which are auto-generated. All these files are something which are auto-generated. We have not manually written this file. You can see that when you open your project inside your Visual Studio Code. So now that you are inside your readme.md file, let's go through the contents of this file. As you can see, the first thing they recommend is to go to figma.com/plugin docs and setup page. We are already on that page, as you can see over here. Now the next step is to install Node.js, and guess what? We have already covered this step as well. Now as you can see, the steps over here are very similar to the steps which I mentioned on the setup guide. Now the next step is install TypeScript. So if you remember, we had skipped this step earlier and we discussed that we will be doing this step once we open our Visual Studio Code. Now to install this TypeScript, I need to open the terminal window inside my Visual Studio Code to run this command. you can see this command over here. What you have to do is you have to select this command and right click and copy the command. Once you have copied the command, what you need to do is you need to open your terminal window. You can do that by going to the terminal menu over here and click on new terminal. What this will do is it will open a new terminal window over here. Now what you need to do is you need to simply paste your command over here. Before running this command, we need to do one more thing. We need to write sudo, which is sudo. Now what you're doing here is you're giving it your admin permission before you execute the command. So there are some commands which need administration permission before you can run them, and this is one of them. So when you write sudo and the command, what it will do is it will ask you for admin password. As you can see, it is asking me to write the password over here. What I can do is I can write my system password, and whenever I'm writing the password, it will not show my password to mask it. So I have written the password, but I cannot see anything. Once I have written the password, I can press on enter and my password will be executed and the command will be executed. Now as you can see, this command have successfully executed and it have installed the TypeScript package for me. Now the next command which I need to do is I need to install the plugin typings file which is offered by Figma. I can copy this and I can paste it. Now again we will do the same thing. We will add sudo over here before we run the command. Now before I even execute this command, I would like to take a break over here and I would like to explain you what exactly is this typing file which we are going to install. So the typing file is something which is offered by Figma itself, and it is basically there to help you while you're writing your TypeScript commands. So it will help you with annotations, it will give you suggestions when you're writing your code, and it will help you avoid any error case or edge case when you're writing the code before even executing the code. So it can basically save some of your time and help you accelerate your development process. So now that you know what exactly is the typing file, let's go ahead and execute this command. As you can see, this is installing some packages and those packages are successfully installed. Now, when the packages are installed, you can see over here that there's a new folder which is added. It is called node modules. Now in this folder is my Figma typings file. Now let's go ahead and do the next step. As you can see over here in the readme file, it is suggested that I should compile my TypeScript file and I should do some steps to convert it into JavaScript file. Now let me point out the TypeScript file which readme.md file is talking about. As you can see this file over here, there is a symbol called ts and the file name is code.ts. Now this is the TypeScript file which readme.md file is mentioning about. We need to convert this TypeScript file to the JavaScript file which is empty over here. Once we do that, our plugin will start running. Now I want to do one thing over here. I want to actually see what happens if I directly go run my plugin without converting my file. Let's go ahead to our Figma and let's go to the test environment file which we have created. Let's right click, go to plugins, and to run any plugin that we built on our local system, we can go to this development section over here and select the plugin. Now as you can see, we had created test plugin FPD. When I select it, I get this error, which is this plugin template uses TypeScript. Follow the instruction in readme.md file. Now basically, whenever I run a plugin which I am directly running from the TypeScript file, my plugin will never run. Figma plugin environment directly consumes the data from the JavaScript file, but it is suggested to write your code in TypeScript file to avoid error cases. So I need to do one thing here over here, which is convert my TypeScript file into JavaScript file to even run this plugin. Now how you can do that is, as you can see, there are some steps which are mentioned in the readme.md file over here. What you need to do is you need to click on terminal and click on run build task. What it will do is it will ask you for some options. What you have to select over here is watch tsconfig.json file, as it's mentioned in the step over here. We'll actually talk about these steps in detail after we run our first plugin, but for now let's go ahead and do that. When I go and do that, I can see some status updates updating over here, which says starting compilation in watch mode, and now it says found 0 errors. Basically what it has done is it has compiled my TypeScript file into my JavaScript file. Now as you can see over here, there is some content in the JavaScript file which was empty before. Now my TypeScript file is successfully converted into JavaScript file. Now let's go ahead and try and run the plugin again. Let's see what happens now. Now when I run the plugin, my plugin is successfully running and I can see a UI modal over here, which is asking me to input the number of count to create a rectangle. As you can see, by default, there's a number which is 5. Let's click on create and see what happens. Basically, whenever I click on create, it creates 5 rectangles on my Figma artboard. And yes, that is your first Figma plugin. That's how you can get started with the basic template which Figma plugin has to offer. Now your plugin is successfully running. Now before I end this video, I would also like to explain what exactly happened over here. To break this down, we need to understand the role of each and every file which is present in this project, and we need to understand the correlation between these files as well. Do remember, these are not the files that we have added manually. These are the files which were automatically created when we have created our first Figma plugin template. You can also open your project in VS Code and see you will find all these files. But also remember that we had manipulated one file which is code.js. This is the file which was empty earlier, but then we converted our TS file and converted it into JavaScript, and that's why we have some content in the code.js file. So now let's start with the UI.html and try and understand what this file is doing over here. So this file which we have over here, UI.html, is exactly the same file which we had discussed about in the second video. If you remember, any Figma plugin is a combination of UI plus functionality, and UI is handled by UI.html. And yes, this is the same file. So we need to understand what exactly are the contents of this file. There's a heading tag and there's an input tag. Below that there are 2 buttons, and then we have a script tag. If you see, there's a heading called rectangle created, and we are also taking some input from users, and we have 2 buttons called create and cancel. You can directly head over to your Figma and relate this to exactly the plugin that we have. This is the same heading, this is the same input field, and these are the exactly same 2 buttons. Now let's try and understand what exactly is this script tag doing over here. So before I break this down, we need to understand how things works under the hood with Figma plugin. So Figma have explained this really well on this page called how plugins run. I will link this down below in the description as well. So this page explains how the execution model is maintained with Figma plugins and how there are 2 environments which are responsible to execute your plugin. So first one is a sandbox and another is an iframe. So with the sandbox is where you communicate with your canvases, layers, and your selections, your viewports, and all the elements that you have on your canvas, basically all the Figma APIs. And this iframe is where you communicate with users input, where you show things to user, you take their data, where you use some browser APIs to communicate with the user. Now to make these environments work together, you need to send and receive message, which is handled with this post message method. And now we are going to see how this is happening with our plugin. So as you can see over here, what is happening is, in this script tag, I'm first of all checking if my create button is clicked or not. If that is clicked, I'm capturing the input which I have received in the text box, and then I'm converting that input into an integer value. Once I have received that integer value, I'm sending that value with this post message method with a message attached to it which is called create rectangle, and the variable which is having the value. And you can also see what happens when your user is clicking on cancel. Whenever user clicks on cancel, what we are doing is we are sending this message again using this post message, and we are adding the message which is cancel. Now we need to see how these messages are received and what are the actions which are performed when these messages are received. So if you go back to your code.ts file, you will see over here there is this function called figma.ui.onMessage, which is receiving the messages passed from that HTML file. Whenever we are receiving this message, we are checking what are the content of the message. If the message type is create-rectangles, we will perform this line of code. And if the message is not this, we'll perform this line of code, which is figma.close plugin. So basically, if a user is cancelling, it will directly run this function, which is figma.close plugin, and close the plugin. But we are concerned about what happens when a user clicks on create rectangle, when the message is create-rectangle is passed. So we need to understand over here is there's a loop which is running whenever this message is passed. This loop runs basis on the count of the input which you had taken from the user. So if user had entered 5 as a value, this loop will run 5 times. If they had entered 10, this will run 10 times. Now basically this is the main thing which is happening from the plugin, which is it is creating a rectangle on your canvas, and after it's creating the rectangle, it's also placing that rectangle on the x-axis, and after that it is adding some fill color into your rectangle and then appending that rectangle to your Figma's current page, and then just pushing that rectangle to all the nodes which are present in that page. Now this is how a rectangle is created, and this loop runs 5 times, so that's why you see 5 rectangles. And yes, this is how the logic of this particular plugin works. Now that we know what is code.ts file and what is ui.html file, and we already know how this file is generated, we need to understand what are the other files that we have over here. So let's again start from tsconfig.json file. So this is a configuration file for the typings file that you had downloaded earlier with the npm module, and this is basically letting your project know that your typings files is present in this node modules folder. As you can see over here, there's this node modules folder where your typings files can be found. It's just for your project to understand the location of that file. Now moving on to the next file, which is readme.md file over here. Now this is a file which we have already worked with, right? This was the file which helped us understand all the remaining steps which were there. So this is just a document file. MD stands for markdown, which is just for you to understand what are the things that you need to do. And it's for human consumption. It's not for your program to understand anything. It's just a document that you can use to understand how plugin can be configured. Now the next file which we have over here is package.json file. Now package.json file is a file which contains all the metadata about your project. Basically things like name, version, description, and all the other dependencies which are there. So this could be something which could be really useful if you have a big team of all developers working on your project and who are integrating multiple project dependencies as well. This is a file that can be maintained to have some information of project in one single file. And this another file which is package-log.json is something similar, which is also having some more details about the metadata of the project and some details about typings file as well. Now let me tell you one thing, these two are some of the files which you will not be manipulating on a day-to-day basis when you're working with plugins, but it's always good to have an idea of what these files are doing in your project. Now let's move on to the next file, which is manifest.json file. So this file defines the manifest of your plugin. It contains all the data like the name of the plugin, the unique ID which is generated for the plugin, the API version, and the main file and the ui.html file which is there for the plugin. It is basically letting your Figma plugin environment know that it has to take the HTML code from this file, the JavaScript code from this file, and basically it's just routing all of these files together. Now we are already aware of code.ts file and code.js file. With this, we have covered all the files which are present in this folder, and now we have a good idea of what these files are doing in your project. And yes, that is how you create your first Figma plugin. I hope you were able to follow me in this video and you're clear with the sections of this topic. If you have any doubts, please leave that down in the comment section below and I'll try to reply to them. And that was it for this video.